As a Moroccan-born artist who lives in New York and Marrakesh, as well as traveling frequently in the Arab world, I have become deeply aware of how the cultures of the so-called Orient and Occident view one another. I have become increasingly aware in particular of the impact of Western gaze on the Arab culture. Essaydi said famously described the dominant Western take on the Arab culture in his groundbreaking book, Orientalism. Although Orientalism most often suggests the 19th century European vision of the East as a set of assumptions it lives on today, both in the regard of the West and in the way the Arab societies continue to internalize and respond to that regard. Because in its early form, Orientalism was a literal vision finding expression in the work of Western painters who traveled to the exotic East in search of culture more colorful than their own. I have used it as a point of departure in much of my work, painting and photography both. The imagery I found in Orientalist painting has resonated with me in a tricky way, and ultimately helped me situate my own experience in a powerful visual language. Speaking to you now, I thought this complex of idea we call Orientalism, as reflected in the work of the Western painters that inspired it, might serve to ground my remarks. But I would like to begin by emphasizing that my relationship to the Orientalist tradition is a complicated one. I am able to appreciate the beauty Western painters found in Morocco, Egypt, and in other Arab countries, which they rendered in such loving detail. And at the same time, I cringe at their distorted and degrading view of the Eastern way of life, as portrayed in their work, and most strikingly in their presentation of Arab women. I can simultaneously regret how their demeaning imagery imprinted itself on the society depicted, and at the same time believe that we all bear the responsibility of freeing ourselves from imposed identities. Let me just note that I am an artist, and that my work flows from my own particular history. The many territories that converge in my work are not only geographical ones, but territories of the imagination, shaped above all by childhood and memory, by invisible influences. My work is haunted by space, actual and metaphorical, remembered and constructed. My photograph has grown out of a need I felt to document actual spaces, especially those of my childhood. In order to progress as an artist, I found I needed to return physically to my childhood home in Morocco and capture this world, which I had left in a physical sense, but which, of course, never in a more deeper psychological way. The culture and space of my childhood was defined by specific domestic spaces, spaces that still exist but are in the process of slowly deteriorating. My process in creating my photographs was in many ways as important to me as any final product could have been. Work on these pieces starts several months in advance of the actual shooting, with the process of writing on the fabric that covers the walls, furniture, and women's clothing. Although I have occasionally had help, I do most of the writing myself, and as you can see, it is a big job. I need to have a large surplus of fabric on hand when I start the shoot, because the henna flex off each time the women move. This means rewriting on fabric after each photograph. Obviously, this time involved, obviously such labor-intensive art making is process-oriented, and I welcome the time involved. It is in the process itself that discoveries are made, change in perception occurs, and new form of self-expression emerge. Converging Territory series is set in Morocco in a large and occupied house belonging to my family. Until fairly recently, my work was preoccupied with this physical space. The house is both a literal and psychological one, a space marked by memory. More recently, however, after having revisited this space, this house many times in making these photographs, and thinking about my own complex relation as an artist to the space of childhood, I have become aware of another less tangible, more ambiguous one, the space of the imagination, of self-creation. Creating these photographs was performative. I used family acquaintances as models. Applying henna is a very painstaking process and cannot be interrupted, so the models were unable to rest, sometimes for as long as 9 hours. I do everything they can to make the process easy on them. I create a whole atmosphere for them so that they won't be bored. We play music and tell stories, and we only proceed after a day rehearsing so they know exactly what to expect. Despite the demanding process, the women in the photograph participate because they feel that they are contributing to the greater emancipation of Arab women, at the same time conveying to a Western audience a very rich tradition often misunderstood in the West. They see themselves as part of a small feminist movement. Henna is a crucial element in the life of a Moroccan woman. It is associated with the major celebration in her life. It is first applied when a girl attains puberty to mark her passage into womanhood. When she is a bride, it is used to enhance her charms for her husband. And finally, it is applied when she has her first child to celebrate fertility. It is obvious that my photographs are expressions of my own personal history. They can also be taken as reflections on the life of Arab women in general. There are continuities, of course, within Arab culture, and I am uncomfortable thinking of myself as a representative of all Arab women. Art can only come from the heart of an individual artist, and I am much too aware of the range of traditions and laws among the different Arab nations to presume to speak for everyone. Physical thresholds define cultural ones. Hidden hierarchy dictates patterns of habitation. Thus, crossing the permissible cultural threshold into a prohibited space, in the metaphorical sense, can result in literal confinement in an actual space. Many Arab women today may feel the space of confinement to be a more psychological one, but its origins are, I think, embedded in architectural space. In my photographs, I'm constraining women within space and also confining them to their proper place, a place bounded by walls and controlled by men. The henna painted on their body correspond to the elaborate patterns of the tiles. The women then become literal odalisks. Odalisk from the Turkish means to belong to a place. In Les Femmes du Maroc, the models are Moroccan women living in Boston. And thus, like me, they were living the dual condition that is diaspora, living in another culture, but symbolically marked by our homeland. We chose to engage the language and material associated with traditional Arab and Islamic art as part of negotiation of identity. The palace, which took 28 years to complete, is decorated with mosaic stucco, stained glass, and carved wood. The harem itself is located at its very heart, behind the labyrinthine network of corridors and massive doors. Even now, one can sense its oppressive atmosphere of isolation and concealment. In preparing this work, I spent some time there, trying to imagine how the women felt who were confined to this space. The loneliness, companionship, and solidarity that they shared, united in a kind of sisterhood of the harem. They were kept hidden away together as they were that very existence must be kept secret. In fact, the word harem comes from the Arabic word haram, or sin. Haram is what the sacred laws forbids. The physical harem is the dangerous frontiers where sacred law and pleasure collide. This is not the harem of the Western Orientalist imagination. An anxiety-free place of euphoria, of absence of constraint, where the word harem has lost its dangerous edge. My background is in painting, and it is as a painter that I began my investigation into Orientalism. My study led me to a much deeper understanding of the painting space so beautifully addressed by Orientalist painters enthralled to Arab decor, for its terrific prominence in these paintings. This decor made me keenly aware of the importance of interior space in Arab Islamic culture. And finally, of course, I became aware of the pattern of cultural domination and predatory sexual fantasies encoded in Orientalist paintings. In my photograph, I hope to help the viewer to see Orientalism as a projection of sexual fantasy of Western male artists and as a voyeuristic tradition. But I also invite viewers to appreciate the authentic beauty of the culture depicted. What these artists discovered when they came to our shore was a world filled with exquisite beauty in the architecture, the decorative surfaces, the fabrics, the women's clothing. They saw this juxtaposed to their own drab, subdued bourgeois culture, and their reaction validated its beauty. But the Orientalist vision holds ultimately a dangerous beauty. It lures the viewer into accepting the fantasized slave status of the women depicted in the harems and slave markets. The question for me became how to reclaim the authentic beauty, how to separate the beauty of the rooms, fabric, and so forth from that of the women themselves, so seemingly passive and receptive, rather like the furniture or the welcoming spaces. There is some evidence that the Orientalist perspective has had an impact on the actual lives of men and women, and especially that the rules for Arab women became much stricter as a result of Western influence. When the West portrays Eastern women as sexual victims and Eastern man as depraved, the effect is to emasculate Eastern man and to challenge the traditional value of honor and family. So Arab men feel the need to be even more protective of Arab women, preventing them from becoming target of fantasy by veiling them. But by invoking the Orientalist tradition in a way that makes the viewer aware of its inherent assumption, I hope not to provoke some kind of blame game, but rather to liberate the viewer, Arab and Western alike, from the grip of these assumptions. Furthermore, I am not a sociologist, I am an artist working from a particular vantage point, and as such hope to give full expression to a uniqueness that I hope will resonate with the uniqueness of each viewer. My latest project is in a sense close from my previous work. It too addresses the polarization between East and West, and the ways in which we in the East, to a limiting effect, allow the Western gaze to imprint itself on our view of ourselves. This work, however, situates itself explicitly in an Arab Spring world. Clearly, the Arab Spring has given many groups the courage to come out in public and demand with strength what they believe is right for them. My goal is to hold up a mirror in which people can see themselves, both in fear and in hope. The project takes the form of photographic series in which every photograph depicts a scene set in sort of room and finding Orientalist painting. Each room, its styles, woodwork, and other decor, as well as the women's clothing, are reproduced in faithful detail, but these scenes are inflected with bullet castings that turn the domestic space into a psychological one, charged with contemporary realities. The women inhabit these spaces and dressed accordingly became weapons on themselves. The work portrays both the invasive role of violence and the threat of violence now heightened by the West for fear of terrorism. It will also look to respond to the cultural trend in the Arab world of seeking refuge in Islamic culture and belief. Islam provides a powerful message of peace and can be seen as a potent antidote to the violence of extremism. But like many religions, Islam can also be used as an escape, a withdrawal from today's complexities, and an excuse for constraining women in an attempt to protect the private domestic space. Thank you.